Holy cow! Welcome to Donnie's Hangout Adventures. I did a YouTube post yesterday that I was going to be talking about, well, a lot of the happenings in the coaching world, what's going on, and I'll be discussing some of those. And there's been some big names that have been fired, let go, resigned, retired, whatever you want to say. Because there's always conflicting reports on if they actually got fired, or if they, resigned or whatever. So the first two, with all that happened, with all the other big names, these two didn't really make big headlines. But they did make headlines nonetheless. You had the Falcons, Arthur Smith. He ended up getting fired, and he really didn't do much in his short 3-year tenure with the Falcons. They didn't improve, and they didn't get worse. They were middle of the road. They always called Jeff Fisher the king of 8-8 record. Arthur Smith was the king of 7-10 record, because that's what he did in all 3 years. 7-10, 7-10, 7-10. There was no big. They didn't get worse. They didn't get better, and they're pretty much the same. And the Falcons haven't had a winning season since 2016, so it's been quite a few years for the Falcons since they've had a winning season, and they have 3 mediocre years of the same record. And I'll probably circle back to the Falcons also later in this video, because with these other reports that are in, well, I'll get to that in a minute. All right. Then there's Mike Vrabel, however you say his name. Now, he sort of surprised me because good or great former NFL players, and that's just not NFL, that's NBA, Major League Baseball, whatever it may be, they can't really become a great coach. And my coach Mike, as I'm going to call him, can't pronounce his last name, he's actually been a good coach. I think he'll probably get a job somewhere else. I really do. And, he did pretty well in his first few years as head coach of the Titans, and from 2018 to 2021, he went 9-7, 9-7, 11-5, and 12-5. But the last 2 years, the Titans didn't do so well with a 7-10 and 6-11 record, and end up with a 54-45 overall record. And I do think that he could get a job somewhere else. I really do believe that, with a lot of openings, especially the Falcons head coaching position is also open. It's really open now with what happened with Arthur Smith. As I said, I'll get back to that, and I'm also going to get back to that some more, because the 3 big ones. Let's first talk about in college football. Let's talk about that one first before we move on to the other 2 big names in the NFL that resigned, retired, fired, whatever you want to have you. The big one in college was Nick Saban. This one sort of came out of the blue, sort of like one within the NFL yesterday, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. Nick Saban sort of came out of the blue. I don't need to go into Nick Saban's accomplishments, like 6 national championships and what he did with Alabama, and the Dolphins head coaching job that he did, in 2005 and 6, when he said he wasn't going to take the Alabama job, and he did. Be that as it may. So, Nick Saban retiring, he's in his 70s. A lot of people are saying, well, because they're not getting the recruits that they used to get to Alabama. But they made the college football playoffs this year, so they had a relatively good season. So you could almost say that Saban went out on a high note. You could almost say that. They were one of the final 4 teams that could have won the national championship. Of course they didn't, but they very well could have. And so he went out on a high note, No questions about it. Nick Saban is, I don't know, in the top 8 greatest coaches of all time, maybe top 7 greatest coaches of all time. It's hard to put him in top 5, but there's no question. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. And I think this retirement is probably permanent. You can never really tell with these retirements. But I think Nick Saban, it seemed like during the year, he looked like he was getting a little burned out being the coach. I did notice that a few times in the highlights, that he looked like he was getting burned out. So Nick Saban retiring, is it a surprise? A little bit. But overall, actually, no, because he looked like he was getting burned out during the season. Now, circling back to the NFL, we have one that's... The conflicting reports on this is he's taking another job in the Seahawks organization. Some said he retired. Some say he resigned. I don't know which it is. I don't know. I looked at different news articles on it, and I couldn't get a clear-cut answer on which it was. If he resigned, or if he retired, or if he got fired. I don't know which it is. So, and that's Pete Carroll. Now, Pete Carroll, he's somebody that had an NFL job before. He failed at it. You know, he was the coach of the Jets for 1 year and the Patriots for a couple or three different years. He had a somewhat okay record, 27-21, but it was considered a failure. So when he went to the college ranks in USC, and you know they had that great run there with national championships and the stripping of Reggie Bush's Heisman, you know, and all that. And when Pete Carroll left USC, what was that, 2009? When he left USC, I thought it was just to get out of Dodge and to sort of, you know, because there were going to be sanctions coming down on USC at that time. So he was just trying to get out of Dodge, and so he took the head coaching job at Seattle. Now, when he took the job, I didn't really think that he would do a good job, but he actually surprised me with how well he did, considering he was there for quite a few years. 14 to be precise, with 137 wins, 2 Super Bowl appearances. It should have been 2 Super Bowl championships. It should have been, but because they hadn't run the ball with Marshawn Lynch and all that. So Pete Carroll, his second time in the NFL was a lot better than his first. And he's one of the few that can say, there's not many coaches that can say they had a national championship in college and a Super Bowl championship. The only one I can think of at this time that's on the tip of my brain is Jimmy Johnson. That's the only one I can actually think of at this time, because there's not many that have been able to do that. It's the very, very, very short list nonetheless. It is a very, very short list. Now the final one, he hasn't done the press conference. He hasn't fully said it yet. It hasn't been fully confirmed, but First Take and Undisputed and ESPN and all the major news articles are pretty much, they're pretty much saying it is the case that the Patriots and Robert Kraft, who's the owner of the Patriots, they're pretty much saying that they are, here's the conflicting reports again. They're saying that Bill Belichick is resigning. They're saying that he was fired. He's saying he was let go. I don't know. These conflicting reports can be really conflicting at times. So Bill Belichick, who has not done well with his coaching tenure since, well, Tom Brady, left and went to the Bucs. They've not really done too well because Bill Belichick, it was only staying in coaching for one reason and one reason only. You could say it was for the love of the game. You could say that. But I think he's trying to chase history because right now he's at 302 wins, which is a lot. But he trails Hallis by 16 wins and Don Shula by 26 wins. I think that was the only reason he's staying in coaching. I think maybe time has passed Belichick by, especially this year. He looks really old on the sidelines. He looks extremely old. He just had one of his worst seasons, which includes when he coached the Browns in the 90s. They didn't have that type of a season. This is his worst season he's had in his coaching career. 3 wins, 14 losses. Their offense was atrocious. Their defense wasn't bad. It wasn't Bill Belichick style defense, but it wasn't a bad defense. And Belichick, I think he's 72, looked old. He looked really, really old. He looked like a 93-year-old coaching this year. And I said, what? Just a cow? Oh, yes. Remember towards the beginning of the video, I mentioned the Atlanta Falcons have a coaching position opened up. Yes, they do. There's been reports that Mike Vrabel could take that job. I think he should take it more than a very old Bill Belichick. Because Bill Belichick would only take the job for one reason, and one reason only, to get those wins that he needs to become the all-time winningest coach. Listen, Bill Belichick, they try saying, is the greatest coach in NFL history, or greatest coach in history overall. I don't know. I don't like to discuss the greatest of all time or GOATs. I tend to try to stay away from that topic. I don't know if he's the greatest of all time, but personally, I think it's time for him to retire, go off into the sunset. I know it wouldn't be like a Nick Saban type of thing where he actually went on a high note. I know it would be going out on a low note, but I don't think Belichick taking the Atlanta Falcons head coaching position would be a smart idea. I really don't, because Belichick looks done. I'm sorry, but he looks done at this point. I think maybe he should retire, and I think if the Falcons are seriously considering this, they shouldn't. They should not even remotely consider hiring Belichick. Hire some other younger coach like Vrabel or somebody else, because clearly they would be up for the job. Belichick is not going to be up for the job. You can sign another coach to a 5-year deal. You can't sign Belichick to a 5-year deal. You can't do it. You can't do it. And also, another thing I noticed is I think that there's something else that's becoming a lost art in the NFL is they only hire head coaches. You know, they'll hire GMs or whatever. Belichick is one of the last. He's one of the last GM head coaches. I think that is going by the wayside because you can't be both at the same time. It doesn't tend to work out really that well. It's worked somewhat for Belichick, and somewhat it has not. He was somewhat good at drafting players. He was somewhat not good at drafting players. Let me tell you, there was some big-time busts that Belichick did, draft. There was some that he was good at. The one, they always talk about Brady. Well, that Brady was enigma. That was one of those rare instances where a 7th-round draft pick becomes a Hall of Famer. You do not hear that often. And I do think Belichick should just retire, because when I saw this year, he looked old. He looked really, really old. So with all the big time coaches, especially in the NFL and NCAA football, you had Saban hanging it up, Pete Carroll pretty much hanging it up, and Belichick should hang it up because, like I said, he looked old this year. He looked extremely old. And you know what? So as of right now, with the Belichick, it says that they've agreed to mutually part ways. I love that term. I love that term. And otherwise, that means you're fired. We're moving on from you. You know what? Just a cow. Anything you want to add? Yeah, we'll discuss that on the next video about another cow that's over there. But we will discuss that on the next video, which will be on Rumble. When? I don't know when that will be. But we will discuss that on the next video. I promise I will, just a cow. You know what? That's all, folks.